Annyeonghaseyo and hello to each and every one of you. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you probably the most top 3 requested video recipe that a lot of you have asked me, and that is how I like to make pho at home. So today I'm going to be showing you how I like to make beef pho at home for my family. And pho is a well-beloved, well-known noodle dish in Vietnam. It is loved all over the world as well. Everyone kind of has their own take on it, how they like to make the broth, what kind of toppings and sauces they like to add on there. Hmong people love to eat pho, and Hmong people like to be a little bit extra, not gonna lie, because we like to add more sauces to there. We like our broth a little bit higher in sodium, different types of toppings, so we just kind of like to add a lot of sauces that sometimes is not necessary or not familiar with other people, but this is how my family and how I grew up eating pho, so I'm going to show you how to make it today. It is a little bit time consuming, but it is so worth it. So with that, let's go straight into it and I'll show you how to make it. Let's go. Let's start by making the beef broth first, which is the most time-consuming part. So most pho broth consists of beef bones, some oxtail, and maybe a chunk of either brisket or chuck. I like to use beef ribs along with some oxtail. You could definitely use any part of the beef you like. You can just do beef bones as well, but I actually prefer beef ribs for the flavor and the meat, and oxtail for the flavor and also the meat. By all means, you can definitely add some beef bones as well. And for the aromatics, so here I have some big Korean green onions. I like to use the big green onions here because they actually produce a little bit more flavor, especially when I char it and cook it. I also like to add some garlic in here. Garlic is optional. It just adds another level of flavor as well. It doesn't make the broth garlicky if you were curious. It just adds another level of flavor, so I like to add it in there as well. I also have some fresh ginger that I sliced to about 3 to 4 inches long. And then I'm also going to be using some daikon radishes that I peeled and sliced to about this big of a chunk here. I have a really good nonstick pan, and what I'm going to be doing is pan searing the meat and the aromatics. A lot of people actually boil the meat to get rid of any impurities and then throw out the liquid and rinse the meat off and then put it into some fresh new water and boil it for the broth. But I actually prefer pan searing it for extra flavor. So I'm going to pan sear the oxtail first, place it onto the pan and turn it on to medium-high heat and allow each side to sit for about a couple of minutes to get some really good coloring to it. And then once it starts to have some really good coloring like this, I'm going to place this into a really clean big pot. Oxtail releases quite a lot of grease, so I'm going to take some paper towels and just wipe off the excess grease. And then I'm going to place the beef ribs right into the pan as well. And again, just cook this for a couple of minutes until all the sides has some really good coloring. I'm going to remove this and place it into the same pot. And then into the same pan, I'm going to add in the big green onions and char it for a couple of minutes until it gets some pretty good coloring like this. And then place it into the pot as well. Into the same pan, I'm also going to pan sear the ginger and the garlic. And then once you start to see a little bit of char, go ahead and remove it and place it into the pot as well. I'm going to place the daikon radish right in. It doesn't need any charring, just goes into the pot along with some water. I'm going to season this with some salt and then place a lid just slightly on top and then cook this on medium heat. As it starts cooking, go ahead and clean the top here, take out any unwanted residue so that we can have a much cleaner broth, and allow this to cook on medium-low heat for about an hour and a half. Try not to hard boil the broth. It should just be a nice medium-low simmer with really soft bubbles like this. While the broth is simmering away, let's go ahead and toast the spices. This is the spice pack that I'm using, just 1 pack of this. I love using this because it's easy to find at my grocery store. It has all the spices that I need, but if you do want the exact ratio because you can't find this particular package, I'll put the recipe in my website so that you can follow that. The great thing about this packet is that it also includes a bag in there as well to put all your spices in. I'm going to remove the spice bag first and then just pour all of the spices into a really good non-stick pan. I like to toast this when I see some golden color to it. The spices starts popping and the aromas should start smelling nice and toasty in your house. Once the spices are all toasted, allow it to cool before you put it back into the spice bag. Tie it really good and then just set this aside until you're ready to use it. After an hour and 30 minutes of slow simmering the broth, I am going to take out the beef ribs. The ribs are cooked to my liking. They are super soft and tender. So I'm going to take it out now before they get even softer. But I'm going to leave the oxtail in because they're not tender yet. So if you notice that your oxtail are tender already, you can definitely take it out. But I'm going to continue cooking it and leaving it in there to get it a little bit softer. At this point, I'm going to add some seasoning. So here I have some rock candy. Rock candy just gives it a little bit of sweetness, and this is the one that I'm using here, if you were curious. I'm going to add this little chunk here into the broth. And then I'm also going to be adding some beef powder for extra flavor and also for the umami. And this is the one I'm using. This is a very popular Korean beef powder flavoring mix that you can find at almost any Korean grocery store. And there's two versions. I like the gold version in particular just because it has a little bit more elevated flavor. This is an easy and great flavor enhancer for any beef-based broth. So I'm going to add in a couple tablespoons of this into the broth along with some fish sauce and in the little bag of toasted spices. And then I'm going to cook this for another 45 minutes on low to allow the spices to release all the aromatics into the broth. And then after 45 minutes, I'll check the tenderness of the oxtail. If they're nice and tender, this is the time when I spider out everything. So I'm going to use a spider and just take out all the aromatics, all the oxtail and the packet of spices, and then place it into a bowl. And then I'm going to filter out the broth into a new clean pot. I have a sieve along with a cheesecloth that I'm going to place over, and then just carefully pour the broth right over. I like using a cheesecloth just so that it can pick up any unwanted impurities. It just creates a much clearer broth as you strain it out. The broth is pretty much ready to use, but it does have a really thick layer of fat on the top here because oxtail and beef ribs does release a lot of oils as it cooks down. So if you want to use the broth the day of, you could definitely take a ladle and just carefully skim off the oil on the very top here and just either discard it, or you can also keep the beef fat. But since I'm not in a hurry to use the broth, I do like to cool the broth in the fridge to allow the oil to solidify because it just makes a cleaner, less greasier broth to use. So before I cool it and put it back into the fridge, I do like to place the ribs and oxtail back into the broth. I don't want the beef to dry out, and also it allows the beef to absorb all the flavors from the broth. I personally like to use the broth the next day. I just find that it's a little bit more flavorful. It's easier to clean off the beef fat. So this is definitely a preference. So as you can tell here, the beef fat has solidified. I'm just going to take a spoon and just carefully skim it off and put it into a really good non-stick pan. I'm going to be using the beef fat to make a very simple chili oil crisp to put on top of my pho. Turn on the heat and allow the beef fat to melt. And then I'm going to add in some minced garlic. Give this a really good stir, and also some green onions. And I'm just using just the bottom part of the green onion. I sliced it into strips like this and then just place it in with the garlic and allow this to cook on medium heat until I start seeing some really good coloring happening to the garlic. So stir as you go, and then once I see a little tinge of golden color to the garlic, I'm going to turn off the heat and then season it with some mushroom seasoning. I have some salt and sugar, some dry chili flakes, and some coarse grind Korean chili flakes as well. Give this a really good stir, and this is my very simple beef fat chili oil crisp. In our family, we love to have some type of chili oil crisp to put into our pho. So this is a totally optional thing that you can do. I do want to note that as this chili oil crisp sits, it does solidify because it is made with beef fat. So warm it up again to get it a little bit easier for you to use. Now, before we heat up the broth, I do want to take care of the noodles and all the other toppings that I like to add into pho. Today I'm just using dried rice noodles that I have handy in my pantry. This is the one that we usually have in our pantry or like to use when we eat pho. If you're using dried rice noodles, just place it into a bowl and submerge it in some warm water and allow this to sit for about an hour until it's hydrated and flexible. But you can definitely use any rice noodles of your choice. You can buy packets of fresh rice noodles at your local Asian grocery store. My brother loves eating pho with the thick rice noodles like this, so you can also buy these as well. So the type of noodles you like to use for pho is really up to you. It's time to prep the vegetables and the herbs that you're going to be putting into the pho. So I usually prep these ahead of time, just set it so people can build their own pho bowl. Here I have some Thai basil. I have some thinly sliced white onion. I just use a mandolin to cut it really thin like this. And then I just took one lime and cut it into wedges. And then I have here one bundle of green onion that I thinly sliced. And then some cilantro. I just rough chop it. You can either make it big or small, really up to you. And then I also have some fresh bean sprouts. This is totally optional, but I do like to have some thinly sliced beef available as well. And then a ton of different types of sauces on the side so that people can build and make their own pho bowl. So in the Hmong household, you'll probably see these type of sauces on the counter. Whenever we make pho, we'll have either Hoisin sauce, some sriracha sauce, and some instant beef flavor paste. This is the one that the guys in the house says I always have to have whenever I make pho, so I have to have this handy. Oyster sauce, and sometimes some dark sweet soy sauce, some more fish sauce, some black pepper, chili oil crisp, and some sugar. And if you want to be a little bit adventurous, my brother says that he must have creamy peanut butter whenever we eat pho. I personally don't really care for peanut butter in my pho. If I was to put peanut butter in my pho, I would actually roast peanuts and crush it up like this and then put it into my pho for a little bit of texture and nutty flavor. But peanut butter is totally preference. So the chili oil's made, the noodles are all prepped and ready, the herbs and vegetables are also prepped and ready, and then the sauces are all set on the counter. It's time to heat up the broth. So before I heat it up, I do like to take the beef ribs out. Since they're cold right now, it'll be a lot easier for me to take the meat out and cut it into chunks. I do like to cut it into bite-sized pieces and then just set it aside next to everything else. I'm going to leave the oxtail in the broth because they do taste better hot and warm. Bring the broth back up to a boil, and then I'm going to add in some beef meatballs. These beef meatballs are usually frozen. I like to thaw it and then just cut it in half so that they're a lot easier to eat. I like to do a mix of meatballs that have tendon and ones that don't. Place this into the hot broth and allow it to cook. Once it's cooked, you'll notice that it'll start rising to the top. And then once the broth comes to a boil, we are ready to assemble. To build my bowl, I'm going to take some of the rice noodles and just grab a really good portion and bundle it up and then place it into my rice basket. I'm going to cook the rice noodles in some hot boiling water for about 3 to 5 seconds, no more than that, and then place it into the bowl. I do like to fluff up the noodles a bit and then add in some of the chopped beef ribs, cilantro, green onions, sliced onions, and the thinly sliced beef. Make sure the broth is hot and boiling so that when you're pouring it over the raw beef, it cooks it all the way through. I'm going to finish this off with some fresh bean sprouts, basil, and then at this point the seasoning and the sauces is really up to you. You can eat it just like this or add whatever other seasonings you like. For me personally, I just like to add a little bit of black pepper and then a really small spoonful of the chili oil crisp that I made. When pho is being made in a Hmong household, everyone does and build their pho bowl a little bit different. Everyone differs with what kind of sauces and vegetables and herbs they like to add into their bowl of pho. This is my mom's bowl. She likes it a little bit more simple. She just adds herbs and peanuts and black pepper, and she just enjoys it simply like this. My dad and my brothers love to add a ton of sauces into their pho. So you'll see sriracha, you'll see oyster sauce, the beef paste, sugar, peanuts, green onions, cilantro, onions, lime juice, bean sprouts, the raw beef, and then the hot broth is poured over. If you're like my brother, peanut butter will also be added. I do like to give this a really good mix, taste the broth, and adjust the seasonings if I need to. Once everything's all mixed up, then I'm going to add in a pretty big chunk of oxtail right in, and then enjoy this super comforting, very delicious bowl of pho while it's still hot. And that is it for today's video. I hope you can give this recipe a try. If you do want the full written recipe, I'll put the link down in the description box so that you can give it a go as well. But do let me know how you like to eat pho, what kind of toppings and sauces you like to add on there. Other than that, I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!